Okay, what separates the founders who make it and from those who don't? It is the idea. Is it timing? Is it the funding? Most people have the answer. Very few people have lived through it. Welcome to Bold Moves. I am your host, Mary Mayer. This podcast is for anyone navigating leadership career and has decided to take a less traditional path and thrive in spaces that were not necessarily designed for him or her. So there is no rehearsed answers, no polished highlights, real conversation and real answer. Today's guest started his career as a corporate attorney with Wilson Sonsini, one of the most prestigious law firms here in Silicon Valley, Yale Law grad, Stanford, but he chose a less traveled path and decided not to stay in the course of law career. Instead, he started going to startups, building for the next 25 years. He scaled and exited companies worth $1.5 billion. He spun robotics out of Uber and took it to Nasdaq in 2024. And he wrote a book, Exit Pass, How to Win the Start and Startup Endgame. And here's his book. I have started. I highly recommend it. So if you haven't heard it, please go ahead and purchase it because it's a great book. Starting it, so it's a great book to read. So come Mr. Touraj Parang. He is currently president and COO of Robotics Serve. Welcome, Touraj.
Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for that kind introduction and also for purchasing the book and taking a look at it. I hope you find it useful, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and your audience.
Fantastic. I'm just going to jump onto the questions. So what do most founders misunderstand about why companies actually succeed or fail?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And it's something that I must admit, I hadn't really understood it myself when I started my first startup, which is Jackster back in 2005. So maybe I'll give you a little bit of story about Jackster, what happened in that entrepreneurial journey. My first round of going from all the kind of napkin stage all the way to exiting that startup. It was, as all startups are, a huge learning experience for me. So we started Jackster with the idea of what would happen if you brought your cell phone, which people love to talk on and text on, and combine it with social media. This was a radical idea back in 2005 because we didn't have cell phones that were smart. We had those feature phones, and this is a pre-iPhone era. So we kind of figured that we could bypass basically a lot of telco not regulations, but also fees and other things that was using the cellular network by using the IP network. This is called voice over IP, the underlying technology. So we did combine IP networks and your cell phone by putting a widget on your social media profile, like MySpace, Friendster, names that some of your audience may not even be familiar with, but these are all precursors to Facebook. And for a while, we had a really interesting user adoption. We went from 0 to 1 million users within a month of launching, which for that time in 2006 timeframe was unheard of. And we kind of quickly grew. We had our pick of VCs. Sand Hill Road VCs were basically, we chose some of our top VCs on our wish list became investors, and we raised about $20 million through the 4-year life of the company. And we thought we had it all figured out. We were just going to build a multi-billion-dollar company. And so we decided to just really focus and not distract ourselves with any external partnerships or talking to potential acquirers, because who needs that when you have a successful company? Lo and behold, the market has a different ending in mind for us. So in 2008 and 2009, we hit that recession downturn with Lehman Brothers going under. Coincidentally enough, Lehman Brothers had actually wrote the last check. Their venture fund had led our Series B round just a couple of months before they went under. I can't take any credit or blame for what happened to them, but it was a
I
bit
hope you cashed the check.
coincidental.
Did you guys
we
cash the
did. We did.
check?
We
Good.
did cash the check. But it wasn't enough. We needed to raise more money. And what happened was that venture world was just not having it. They didn't want to invest in companies that were losing money. We were losing money. We didn't really have a clear path to profitability because we were just focused on growth, and monetization or profit generation was really not something that was top of mind for us. So we had to quickly pivot, figure out ways to tune our monetization engine, and that takes time. And unfortunately, time is one commodity we didn't have. And so we were 6 months away from running out of cash, and we've decided, okay, well, it sounds like we need to sell the company because we're not able to raise money, it seems. 6 months, we found out, is very short of a time period to build relationships with potential acquirers and sell a company. Pinged all these companies that we thought would be interested in our tech. They hardly ever replied to our messages, and if they did, it was a polite decline. And so we had to do a fire sale, and that's basically euphemism for that, shutting down the company, but just handing over the assets to somebody else to see if they can make something off of it. Summer of 2009, 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears, all that went away, and kind of like a lot of dreams were shattered. We had to lay off our employees. We had grown to, I think, 60 employees at the time. It was really heartbreaking for a founder to see that and go through that. So I took 6 months to really just get my head straight and figure out what happened. And when I reflected on the journey, I realized that our biggest mistake was this lack of really time spent on cultivating those relationships with potential acquirers. And so we basically had a strategic blind spot, and we didn't create any options for ourselves for an exit. And then in subsequent startups, I try not to make the same mistake again. We had radically different results. Next startup, webs.com, we went from 20 million to 120 million acquisition in the span of 2 years, but just implementing some very simple processes that I describe actually in that book, Exit Path, that you showed. And that book basically kind of takes the user through this journey, and all my learnings in the past 25 years, basically being in Silicon Valley and being on multiple sides of the table, starting as a lawyer, then being in VC, and then also being an entrepreneur. Also, I've spent time acquiring companies as an entrepreneur and as an executive in the different companies. So I've seen what happens when startups try to sell their company, the things that they do that are great and things that are not so great. So I've seen it all, and I've tried to kind of capture it all in that book. So that's kind
So,
of my way of giving back.
so let's talk about risk. So with innovation, as companies grow, the innovation shift from innovation to risk management. And you talk about that in your book, and you talk about it here a little bit now. When does that shift quietly start killing these companies and killing innovation?
Yeah. Risk is I would say, kind of a secret friend of an entrepreneur, because usually if there isn't high risk, there isn't high reward either. But just blind risk taking doesn't really lead you anywhere. So you have to take smart risks. And what I've noticed is that great entrepreneurs are smart risk takers. They kind of recognize reality for what it is, and then they put themselves in a position to optimize various outcomes that may kind of come about. So kind of like seeing patterns. For instance, with Jackster, I kind of noticed that there was a pattern of social and mobile, and these two will be converging. And we weren't actually the only company that thought about this. We had 4 other companies that started with the same idea in the same year. All the other companies actually had pretty significant exits except us, because they all created those relationships and strategic optionality. And optionality is really the name of the game when it comes to risk. In a startup, your job is to sort of prepare for unknown unknowns, things that you don't even know you don't know.
Yeah.
Those eventualities can come about. So are you prepared to tackle them when they do come about? So options give you strategic options, give you that opportunity, give you the choice, give you agency as an entrepreneur to actually do something about the changing dynamic circumstances in the market. So the one thing I say is to entrepreneurs that I advise and work with or invest in is that, your value really is created inside the company, inside your four walls, but your outcome is determined outside of your company. And so you need to bridge that. You need to bridge the value you create and the outcome that you will eventually get. And that's a risk mitigation strategy. There's nothing wrong with mitigating risk, but you have to be smart about it, but also not be so focused on risk mitigation that you kind of forget about the upside. Because after all, we are in it as entrepreneurs to change the world, to create outsized outcomes. And those, of course, come with risk. But then can you also prepare for various different versions of the story that would come about? So that's why startups pivot. We found ourselves, for instance, at Serve Robotics, my current company, that at some point it needed to make sense to go to the capital markets rather than go to traditional startup route by doing a series A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We decided to really just go straight to capital markets and list on Nasdaq. And it turned out to be a very smart decision for us because we had much more access to the capital to scale up our robotics company through that process than actually going the traditional VC route. So you have to kind of be ready and nimble and agile to react to various moods of the market.
And then you have to also not only notice pattern, but make very smart decisions in those instances as to how to take your next steps.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing if you unpack what smart really means. What I've realized is that great entrepreneurs run a lot of experiments and they have the wisdom and the savvy to both do that and also to really pick up on where those experiments are successful and when they're not successful, why they are not successful so they can adjust accordingly because no one has a crystal ball. So smart in the sense of having a perfect understanding of what the future holds, no one really does. What smart entrepreneurs do is they run a lot of experiments so that as the future unfolds, they are in a position to really double down or triple down on a path that is most likely to lead to the desired outcome.
When things starts to break, deals, teams, momentum, what patterns do you see in people and how they actually behave? So as an entrepreneur, what are the top three patterns you see?
Yeah, I feel like emotional regulation is a superpower for entrepreneurs. What we do as entrepreneurs, innovators, startup founders is highly anxiety inducing and it's stressful. It can lead to early burnout. It can lead to health problems. And so being able to kind of manage your own anxieties and not let that sort of also become infectious for the rest of the team, I would say is a massive superpower for entrepreneurs. And to that end, you have to kind of take care of yourself. You have to take care of your well-being. It's sort of like an athlete, high performing athletes have various coaches. They have, someone that helps them on the psychology of things, someone that works them on their physical training. Some of them meditate. So you kind of have to have good nutrition, eat healthy. So you kind of have to have the whole package in order to be able to be a really successful entrepreneur. You can't just be one dimensional. If you're a great coder or a great technologist, your chances of success become handicapped by that. So you need to really understand what it takes to succeed, look at role models, see how others have done it. And so it's a roller coaster, and being able to ride the waves and have a positive attitude, know that, the best you can do is control what you can control and not worry about things you cannot control. That's something that comes with time. I had to learn that the hard way myself, and many entrepreneurs have. But I think that's where things go off track, so to speak. In fact, speaking of track, go ahead.
You mentioned earlier that when you started the company and you had to exit it due to the unfortunate market, you took some time off, 6 months to regroup. Is that something you recommend? Is it something you entrepreneurs going through high pressure exit, taking time like you mentioned, getting back to nutrition, self-regulation.
Yeah. So if you have the luxury to take time off, and sometimes you don't, for instance, if you sell your company, a lot of times the acquirer wants you to continue working and like doubling down and building. And so you may not always be in a enviable position to take time off. I sort of was forced to take time off because, the acquirer did not want to hire me or anybody for that matter from the company. So I was without a job. Emotionally, I was exhausted too. So if you
Yeah.
feel that you're exhausted, you're at the end of your rope, either take time or take mini breaks, right? Take long weekends and reflect, or even have an hour of a personal offsite. You should just turn off your devices, turn off your notifications, take pen and paper with a journal and just write down what are your fears, what are your ambitions, what are your goals, and like get back in touch with yourself. As an entrepreneur, that's so important. And great companies have great values, and great values are imparted by the founder. So you have to embody those. You have to know what those values are, embody them, verbalize them. So all those things, it takes a lot of effort. And not that much is really talked about the culture and these aspects of entrepreneurship, but I think those are as important as sort of really executing and having a strategy and this and that.
Yeah, at the end of the day, no matter what, we're still people. We are inflected by anything that, whether psychologically, physically, but it's anything that inflects people at the end of the day.
No, that's super true. In fact, what you find is that in the age of AI, actually expertise is becoming commoditized. So AI can do a lot of things that, just a few years ago, we thought you needed to be an expert and go through years and years of training to be able to do that. What AI is not doing, and I think that's where humanity will find is flourishing, is in judgment and in just having those deep seated values and being able to act with integrity, exercising judgment. Those things are, I think, the real skills of anyone in the age of AI, especially entrepreneurs and founders who want to change the world.
And with that said, what decisions you made that felt wrong at the moment but turned out to be right?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I think sometimes when you have a lot of burning fires, and as an entrepreneur, every day you're faced with just an inordinate amount of things that need your immediate attention. It's hard to kind of think longer term and think about, okay, well, 4 years from now, where do I want to position the company? And which direction do I want to head to? And to me, that sometimes feels like a luxury to kind of think about long term because you have these immediate burning fires that you have to pour water on. But sometimes that there is a bit of a tension in that, which is a good tension. I don't think you should overthink the future because future is inherently unpredictable. I do think you do need to reflect and take a step back every now and then. It may feel wrong. It may feel like you're being wasteful or being too too detached from what's happening, but it is helpful to do that. Sometimes your board may push you to be laser focused and not distract yourself, but sometimes distractions are helpful. And what I encourage entrepreneurs to do is kind of strike that balance to think about long term, build those bridges to the future, especially with strategic partners, building an ecosystem around them, getting to know who else are all the different players in the market. That just seems like a luxury a lot of times, but it pays for itself in dividends in the long term, and it compounds over time. So that's sort of one of those things that may not feel like you can afford to do it, but it's very worth doing it.
Yeah. So do you see more people or more entrepreneurs are more focused on short-term gains versus long-term?
I think just the nature of the beast is that a lot of time you become just dug into the short term because you're like your release cycles. You're releasing something every week, every day. You have customer complaints coming at you. You have regulatory issues coming up. Depending on what you're doing, you may have tariffs to deal with. There's all sorts of things that get thrown your way, and so it's very easy as an entrepreneur to be sucked into it. And one of the key things is that you surround yourself with people who have the ability to both go deep, but also to be able to pull up and kind of not miss the forest for the trees. One way to kind of think about it is also that the future, like your stance toward the future could be either putting down a rail and like trying to go on that rail, or having a compass that indicates where you need to go. But you may have to kind of zig and zag depending on obstacles that get thrown your way. I think that mindset and that flexibility that you can adopt and adapt to changing circumstances is what will really help you. And to your kind of former question about risk management, it all kind of goes together. Also, that nimble mindset also prepares you to have also that more relaxed attitude and not get so attached to outcomes that if an outcome doesn't come about, you're sort of overburdened by anxiety or other emotional impediments.
Now, you've been through a lot of mergers and acquisition and exit. Is the moment then the founder should start thinking about the end game? But when is that time? Is it instinct? Is it the numbers?
I always say start with the end in mind. So always have the end in mind. Always have at least that compass, that North Star, where you want to end up. Now, a lot of times for entrepreneurs, that's the mission. So that's great. But how do you want to achieve that mission? And have really clarity about the mission so that if an acquirer could accelerate your achievement of that mission, you're open to it. And greatest acquisitions are those that are like that, not in a fire sale like I had with my first startup, but one where, the acquirer really values and treasures what you have built. And you see also a lot of value in that acquirer joining forces with you so that you can achieve your mission a lot faster, given the resources of the acquirer. And this has happened many, many times. YouTube probably would have gone out of business because they were a pretty cash intensive business if Google hadn't bought them, or Instagram with Facebook. Zoox, the driverless car company, and Amazon. Acquisitions can be actually really an accelerant to achieving your mission as an entrepreneur. And I think you need to think about that from the very beginning. It's never too early to start building relationships. And the reason you want to build relationships is that companies don't buy companies. It's people actually doing deals. And the people that make those decisions, especially on the acquire side, they view an acquisition as the highest risk undertaking they could do. All things being equal, no one wants to do an acquisition. The kind of story out there is that most acquisitions fail. I personally don't believe that, but most people fear that. And so the status quo is nobody wants to do a deal. So in order to overcome that status quo, there needs to be a lot of trust. There needs to be conviction and confidence in you and your team for an acquirer to come and kind of like take that extra step and really seriously look at what the future would entail if the two companies join forces. So that's why you really need to build those relationships, and don't just build relationships with the corp dev teams, which is the department inside a company that does the transactional things. You need to build relationships with actual decision makers. Sometimes that's the CEO of a company, sometimes just a product manager or somebody else, a president, whatnot. But you need to actually take the time to understand all the ins and outs of that acquirer. Who are the decision makers? Why are they interested or could be interested in a company like you? And at what point in time would they be interested? So all this takes time, and that's why you need to get started as soon as possible.
Now, you mentioned you don't believe or you don't believe that most acquisition fail. So what makes you not believe it? Well, a good percentage of people believe it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think no one really talks about success stories in acquisitions, right? People, the media, our negativity bias, all this has been wired for us to see all the scary cases. So there is an overabundance of scary stories out there and not enough of the good stories. I have been on the side of many acquisitions, both as a seller of companies and buyer of companies. And most of them worked out perfectly fine. So I have personal experience, and it's anecdotal, but there are tens of acquisitions that I have been a part of, and they have all worked out fine for all parties involved. It's just there's no good way to measure whether or not, from an outside perspective, whether an acquisition was successful or not. So the bad ones get the media attention. Yeah, I think that itself is a signal worth paying a lot of attention to. I think um, good entrepreneurs are great listeners and they have great attention to detail. So, why are you stuck? Is it because an outcome that you were hoping for didn't materialize? Is it because people aren't liking what you're building? Is it because you're losing interest in what you're doing? You no longer have conviction and belief that the direction you were heading is the correct one. It's all very contextual. So for me, whenever I get stuck, I become curious. I become curious, and then that curiosity hopefully is followed by running some small experiments, forming some hypotheses, and thinking, okay, the reason I'm stuck here could be A or B or C. Let me validate to see which one of these it is. This is the smallest minimum test I could run to kind of understand whether or not that's true. So kind of like get back, get engaged, become curious. Forward motion is sort of builds momentum. So you don't want to lose that momentum and kind of use every setback as an opportunity both to learn and to sort of generate another experiment from it. That's the way out of being stuck. Yeah. It's hard to be stuck when you're running experiments. Thank you, Mary. Great questions. I enjoyed it a lot. Good luck. Bye.